My neighbors stole 8 inches of my land with a brand new fence, and by the time it was over, that little strip of dirt had cost them more money than most people spend buying a house. I still think about how ridiculous that sounds out loud, because if you'd asked me a few years ago whether 8 inches of property could wreck 2 families and end with lawyers, court orders, and a moving truck sitting in somebody's driveway, I probably would have laughed and told you there was no way. Then it happened to me. Back in 2020, I bought a corner lot outside Asheville, North Carolina, in a neighborhood called Briar Glen. Nothing fancy. Quiet streets, older homes, a lot of dog walkers and retired couples tending flower beds like it was competitive sport. My place sat on just under half an acre. The lot had been vacant for years before I bought it. Overgrown weeds, busted branches, wild grass up to my knees the first time I walked it. But I liked it right away. There was something peaceful about it. I built a simple ranch-style house there. Nothing huge, nothing flashy. Just enough room for me, a back patio, and a little stretch of yard where I figured one day I might throw a grill out and have friends over on Sundays. The house directly east of mine belonged to Russell and Dana Whitmore. They'd lived there forever. Big white colonial, black shutters, a wraparound porch. Everything looked polished. Their lawn was trimmed so perfectly it looked fake. Dana always had flower baskets hanging near the front steps. Russell was the kind of guy who somehow managed to wear khakis like it was a uniform. At first things were fine. A wave across the yard. Quick hello while grabbing mail. That kind of neighbor relationship where nobody bothers anybody. Then spring of 2022 rolled around. I came home from work on a Thursday afternoon and saw a fencing company wrapping up along the shared property line. Fresh cedar panels. Tall. Clean. Expensive looking. I remember thinking honestly, good for them. It looked nice. I waved at one of the workers, carried groceries inside, didn't think another thing about it. Saturday morning, I was out back pulling weeds near the corner edge of my lot when I noticed one of the posts looked off. Just slightly. Not enough for anybody else to care. But when you build a house yourself and stare at every inch of land for months, you start noticing things. I crouched down, looked toward the survey stake from my build permit. Still there. Bright orange cap. Exactly where it had been. And the fence post sat past it. On my side. I stood there staring for a while. I even paced it twice because I honestly thought maybe I was seeing it wrong. But no. The whole fence line crossed over. By maybe 8 inches. Not much. But enough. And there's something funny about property lines. People love pretending they don't matter until it's their property. I brushed dirt off my hands and walked over to Russell's porch. He answered smiling. Hey Mason, he said. What's up? I nodded toward the fence. Looks good. Really. But I think it might have landed a little over onto my side. He glanced past me, then shrugged. Nope. We had it handled. Handled how? Fence company measured. I kept my tone easy. Did they use a surveyor? He smiled like I'd asked something silly. Those guys know what they're doing. I said, well, I still have my survey stakes from construction. They're showing the line differently. He leaned one shoulder against the frame. Maybe your survey was wrong. I laughed a little. Not because it was funny. More because I genuinely couldn't believe that answer. My survey was done by a licensed surveyor before I built. He shrugged again. It's a few inches. I looked him dead in the eye. Yeah, a few inches on my land. Dana stepped into the hallway behind him. Arms crossed. Russell sighed. Mason, come on. We paid a lot for that fence. I'm not arguing that. So then what? I'm saying it needs to move. His expression changed right there. Smile gone. Like I'd suddenly become unreasonable. For 8 inches? For my property line. He shook his head. You're making this bigger than it is. And that right there told me everything. Because mistakes happen. A bad measurement happens. A contractor gets lazy. People apologize. They fix it. That's normal. But that tone, the one that says your concern is inconvenient and therefore invalid, that changes everything. I said one last time, calm as I could. Russell, just have somebody verify it. If I'm wrong, I'll say so. He stared at me for a second, then said, fence stays, and shut the door. I walked home more irritated than angry. I kept telling myself don't turn this into something. It's 8 inches. Go inside. Drink coffee. Let it go. But every time I looked outside, there it was. A line cutting into my yard. Like somebody parked their truck halfway in your driveway and told you not to be dramatic. A week later, I called the survey company that handled my build. An older guy named Bill Harper came out. Gray beard. Mud on his boots. Looked like he'd been surveying land since before GPS existed. He spent maybe 30 minutes checking markers, then stood up, tapped his clipboard, and said, "You're not crazy. Fence is over." "How much?" "About 8¼ inches at one end, 7½ at the other. Runs crooked the whole way." I asked if he'd document it. He nodded. "Absolutely." That night, I walked the report over to Russell's mailbox. Simple note attached. No attitude. No threats. Just, "Hey, had this checked. Looks like the fence crossed the line. Let's figure out the easiest fix." I thought maybe once he saw paperwork this would be over. I was wrong. 3 days later I came home and found an envelope taped to my front door. Law office letterhead. Not mine. His. And the second I read the first paragraph, I realized this had stopped being about a fence and turned into something way uglier. I stood there on my front porch reading that letter twice because the first time honestly didn't even feel real. Russell and Dana, through their attorney, were claiming legal rights to the strip under the fence. Not asking, not negotiating, claiming it. According to the letter, they had maintained and openly used that portion of land for years and intended to preserve their interest in it. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so wildly untrue my brain almost rejected it. That lot sat abandoned before I bought it. Everybody in Briar Glen knew it. The grass used to grow chest-high every summer. Half the neighborhood had complained about snakes over there. Russell hadn't been maintaining anything except maybe the view from his porch. And yet there it was. An official-looking letter with polished legal language basically saying that land had always been theirs and they intended to keep it. That's when I stopped treating it like a neighbor misunderstanding. I called an attorney Monday morning. Her name was Rebecca Nolan. Mid-40s, sharp as a razor, calm voice, didn't waste words. Her office sat downtown over an old brick coffee shop and smelled like paper and cedar. I handed her the letter. She read the first page, then leaned back in her chair and laughed. Actually laughed. Not loud. Just one quick amused breath. "Well," she said, "that's ambitious." I said, "That bad?" She folded the letter. "In North Carolina, adverse possession generally requires years of open and continuous occupation. A fence installed last week doesn't magically rewrite ownership. So they know this." "Oh, probably. Then why send it?" Rebecca gave me a look. "Because sometimes people count on intimidation. They hope you hate conflict enough to back off." That landed harder than I expected. Because she was right. A part of me did want to let it go. Avoid the stress. Avoid the money. Avoid becoming that neighbor. But another part of me, the bigger part by then, kept replaying Russell saying fence stays like the decision was his to make. Rebecca drafted a formal demand. Simple. Professional. 30 days to remove the encroaching fence and restore the boundary. Failure to comply would trigger litigation. We mailed it certified. Then we waited. 30 days came and went. Nothing. No call. No reply. No contractor. Nothing except Russell mowing his lawn every Saturday like life was perfect. He didn't wave anymore. Didn't look over. Dana stopped checking mail when I was outside. You could feel the tension in the street. Mrs. Keating across from us somehow always found reasons to water flowers when either of us stepped outside. Neighbors notice things. Especially quiet neighborhoods. When day 31 hit, Rebecca filed suit. Trespass. Property encroachment. Damages. Legal fees. Once paperwork got served, things escalated fast. Russell hired counsel. A younger guy named Travis Bell. Expensive suit. Aggressive tone. Very into hearing himself talk. Our first hearing happened 6 weeks later. Small county courtroom. Wood benches. Old ceiling fans. I remember sitting there thinking this entire thing started because 2 adults refused to move a fence less than a foot. Judge Mercer walked in. Older guy. Calm. Didn't smile much. Rebecca presented our survey. Travis stood up and launched into this speech about neighborhood aesthetics and mutual benefit. He actually said the fence enhanced privacy and improved both parcels. Like I should have been grateful someone helped themselves to my yard. Then he added that I was behaving unreasonably over a trivial boundary issue. Judge Mercer looked over his glasses. Asked him directly, "Counselor, are you disputing the location of the legal boundary?" Travis hesitated, then said they believed Pryor used justified placement. Judge Mercer paused, then wrote something, and ordered a court-appointed survey. Neutral third party. Split cost. No arguments. Once that happened, I saw the first crack. Russell looked irritated leaving court. Dana looked nervous. Like maybe this had gone further than expected. 2 weeks later, court surveyors came out. Professional crew. Equipment tripods. Laser gear. Flags everywhere. Half the neighborhood suddenly found excuses to be outside. Mrs. Keating watered flowers again. The Henderson kid rode his bike past 6 times. Even old Mr. Larkin stood on his porch pretending to fix a mailbox hinge for almost an hour. Small neighborhoods love drama. Survey took most of the afternoon. And when the report arrived, it was crystal clear. Fence crossed onto my land. 8.2 inches at the widest point. Just over 7 at the narrowest. Entire length. No ambiguity. No gray area. Just math and property records. Rebecca called. Well, congratulations. Reality remains real. I laughed harder than I had in weeks. Next hearing was quick. Judge Mercer reviewed findings. Ruled entirely in my favor. Ordered Russell and Dana to remove and rebuild the fence along the legal line within 60 days. I thought finally done. Nope. They appealed. Rebecca called me after reading the filing. You've got to be kidding me. Apparently Travis argued the judge undervalued community benefit and failed to consider historic usage. Historic usage of a vacant lot. I asked Rebecca if they actually believed this. She said, at this point, doesn't matter. They've spent enough that pride's driving. And she was exactly right. Because once people invest ego into being right, facts become background noise. Appeal dragged for months. Depositions. Filings. Invoices. A lot of invoices. I kept going to work. Mowing grass. Paying bills. Trying to live normal. But every time I looked out the kitchen window, I saw that fence and felt this constant irritation sitting in my chest. Russell got worse. One afternoon I was trimming shrubs, and he walked outside. Stopped near the property edge. Looked over. And said, still worth it. I stood up. Set clippers down. Yep. He smirked. All this over a few inches. I looked straight at him. No. All this because you could have fixed a mistake and decided not to. He stared at me for a second. Then muttered something and walked off. And weirdly, that was the moment I realized he already knew how this would end. He just couldn't back down. Appeals court ruled 6 weeks later. Unanimous. Trial court affirmed. Encroachment confirmed. Their claim dismissed. And because the filing was deemed legally baseless, Russell and Dana were ordered to reimburse my attorney fees. Rebecca called while I was standing in the grocery checkout line. I still remember balancing eggs in one hand while she said, "You won everything." I actually leaned against the cart. Relief hit all at once. Weeks of stress just draining out. How much? She gave me the estimate. Their own attorneys had already billed well over 40 grand. They now owed another 15,000 toward mine. Plus survey costs. Plus rebuild. Plus appeal expenses. I stood there staring at canned soup and thought, over 8 inches. That should have been the end. But the part that burned itself into my memory came a few mornings later. I woke up to the sound of hammering. Looked outside. And there they were. A new surveyor. Bright vest. Official stakes. And a demolition crew tearing down every panel Russell had fought so hard to defend. Boards stacked in piles. Posts ripped from concrete. Dana stood on the porch, arms folded. Russell pacing with his jaw clenched. Nobody waved. Nobody spoke. For 3 straight days workers tore out and rebuilt that fence. Same cedar. Same height. Same everything. Just moved 8 inches. Exactly where it should have been from day one. And watching that happen from my kitchen window, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't satisfying. Not because I wanted them humiliated. I really didn't. I would have preferred a normal conversation 2 months earlier. But there was something deeply surreal about seeing thousands of dollars and months of legal fighting undone by a tape measure and basic honesty. And standing there with coffee in my hand while they rebuilt every single section, I had this strange feeling that the fence wasn't the biggest thing they'd lost. Because once trust breaks between neighbors, it never really grows back the same. And Briar Glen was about to prove exactly that. After that fence got rebuilt, Briar Glen got quiet in a way that felt heavier than silence. You could feel it. Not dramatic. Not obvious. Just that strange neighborhood tension where everyone knows exactly what happened and nobody wants to be the first one to mention it. Russell and Dana stopped waving. Stopped lingering outside. Their front porch used to always have lights on, and somebody sitting there in the evenings went dark more often than not. And I figured that was probably the end of it. Fence moved. Court over. Life goes back to normal. That's what I expected. But life in neighborhoods like that doesn't really reset. It just settles. And whatever happened becomes part of the pavement. Part of how people see each other. A week after the rebuild, I was dragging trash cans back in when Mrs. Keating from across the street called out, "Morning, Mason." I smiled. "Morning." She hesitated, then gave me this tiny half-shrug. "For what it's worth, you were right." I laughed. Apparently the court thought so too. That got her smiling. Then she leaned closer like she was sharing classified information. "Dana told Claire Henderson you were impossible to deal with." "Did she?" And Mrs. Keating looked over at the Whitmore's house, then back at me. "And Claire told her property lines exist for a reason." I nearly choked laughing. That's neighborhood politics for you. Nobody wants conflict, but everybody has an opinion. And once Russell lost publicly in court, people definitely had opinions. Months passed. Summer turned into early fall. Leaves started changing. I got back to normal. Worked. Spent evenings on the patio. Grilled on weekends. And honestly, it felt good looking at that fence knowing it sat exactly where it belonged. Then one Friday morning I drove back from errands and saw a realtor sign in front of the Whitmore's place. Big white sign. For sale. I actually sat there in my truck for a second. Not because I was shocked. More because deep down, it made sense. That lawsuit had burned a lot of bridges. Financially and socially. Russell listed the house high. Very high. Beautiful property, sure. But aggressive. Open houses started. People came through. Cars parked out front. Then left. Weeks passed. Nothing. Price dropped. Still nothing. Dropped again. One afternoon I was out trimming hedges when the realtor pulled up. Nice woman named Sandra. Friendly. Professional. She smiled and asked if I lived next door. I said yeah. She hesitated. Then lowered her voice. "Can I ask something awkward?" I laughed. "Depends." She glanced toward the fence. "Buyers keep asking about that boundary line." I actually had to bite back a smile. "Fair question." She nodded. "I heard there was litigation?" "Resolved." "Anything ongoing?" "Nope." Then I paused and added exactly what was true. The property line is legally confirmed and the fence was rebuilt correctly. Sandra gave me a look like she appreciated a straight answer. Good enough. A few more months went by. More price cuts. More listings. More weekends with strangers touring the house. Russell looked tired every time I saw him. Like somebody who hadn't slept well in a long time. Dana barely came outside. Then one cold morning in December, a moving truck showed up. No announcement. No goodbye. Just workers loading furniture. Boxes. Dining chairs. Lamps. Everything. I was clearing leaves near the curb when Russell finally walked over. First time we'd spoken in months. Hands in his coat pockets. Wind blowing hard. He stopped near the property edge. Looked at the fence. Then at me. And for a second, he looked older than I remembered. Not angry. Just worn down. He said, "House finally sold." I nodded. "Hope the move goes smoothly." He gave one dry laugh. "Sold below asking." I didn't say anything. He looked out toward the road. Then said quietly, "This whole thing got bigger than I expected." I remember standing there thinking how many chances there had been to say that sentence earlier. Before lawyers. Before appeals. Before invoices. Before months of tension. I said, "Yeah, it did." He nodded. Then looked straight at me. And there was this weird pause. Like maybe he was about to apologize. Maybe. But pride's a stubborn thing. Instead he just said, "Take care, Mason," and started walking back. That was it. No apology. No handshake. No closure Hollywood style. Just a man walking toward a moving truck after spending a fortune fighting for 8 inches he never owned. Later I found out through neighbors roughly how expensive it all became. Legal bills on his side alone, over $40,000. Mine reimbursed, around $15,000. Surveyors. Appeal filings. Fence demolition. Rebuild. Realtor fees. And because the house sold below what they wanted after sitting for months, the total damage landed well into 6 figures. All because moving a fence right away felt harder than admitting a mistake. And I still think about that sometimes. Because the truth is, this was never really about land. Not 8 inches. Not cedar panels. Not property stakes. It was about boundaries. Respect. That moment when somebody decides whether they're going to do the honest thing or double down and make everybody miserable. If Russell had knocked on my door that first weekend and said, "Hey Mason, looks like our contractor messed up. Sorry, we'll get it fixed," I probably would have helped carry fence panels myself. Would have brought cold drinks out for the crew. Would have laughed about it. Instead, he made it a contest. and contests have winners and losers. The fence is still there now, straight as can be. Every time I mow near that side yard, I pass those posts and think about how expensive pride can get when nobody checks it early. And every once in a while, somebody walking by will casually mention the Whitmores and say something like, "Crazy how that all happened." And I always say the same thing. It didn't happen over 8 inches. It happened because somebody decided being wrong was worse than being honest. Now I'm curious what you think. If you were in my shoes, would you have let 8 inches go and kept the peace? Or would you have taken it all the way like I did? Drop your take in the comments. Because in neighborhoods like this, everybody has an opinion, and trust me, those opinions can get expensive.